You ready?
All righty.
All right. So the clash of faith and workplace. How interesting. So this is changed to protect the innocent, but through in a hotel. So you're the supervisor at a hotel, and you are responsible for coordinating and supervising the front desk and welcoming staff of the organization. And major urban center with many of the front staff are Muslim, and they've been asking for Fridays afternoons to attend prayer. About a third of the staff fall into this category of Muslims. But it's also because it's a hotel, Fridays are busy days, a lot of check-ins for the weekend and stuff like that. But as could maybe likely be expected, a lot of staff are asking for this time off to do prayers, and the non-Muslim staff are starting to get upset because they're thinking, well, I should have time for Friday afternoons for my needs too. How would you manage this? So in most places, there is a law that says employers have to accommodate a sincerely held belief, such as a religious belief, and accommodate other things for people as best you can. So what do you think about how we're going to manage um, sorry, how would you approach this as a leader and a supervisor in an organization?
I have no idea. This is so out of my realm of.
So let's just bounce
Are
my.
your well, are your staff back to your the previous slide? Like, I guess is it full-time staff? Like, is it
Yeah,
it's a
it's shift
service
work. It's
industry?
24. It was a 24-hour. It was it wasn't a hotel, but it was basically an organization where people were coming in
Right. But
at
would
different
you be
hours.
on shift? Like,
Yes.
okay, so you could potentially, and I don't know, but is there a chance that instead of scheduling people on a Friday and then they need to take it off, rotate it so that they're not on
Yeah.
Friday. I don't know. I've never done
Yeah.
shift work. I don't know. But instead of scheduling them for a Friday afternoon and then having them say, I need Friday afternoon off, can it be that they get their hours in on a different schedule? I don't know.
So I'll just I'll actively facilitate this one a little bit because it's probably might be new to some. So one of the things, one of the first things we did was to make sure people understood uh, what was happening and why, so that all of the staff were sort of brought up to the cultural awareness of the requirements for some people. But one of the things that I coach these guys to do, because I bumped into it myself in a completely different setting, was we brought in an Amman to get advice. Like, what do people require and need? What is
Mm-hmm.
reasonable to give people? So, for example, and the reason I came up, it was kind of I don't know if it was a funny story or not, but it kind of made me laugh. Like, so during Ramadan, the Muslim faith, you eat before sunrise. You don't eat between sunrise and sunset. Yet in northern Canada, that's a long time. So
Yeah.
even in Calgary, right? It's in the summer. It's like whatever, almost like five in the morning to 10 at night. And so what we did was we we went to an imam and asked their advice, and what the advice council was that it's just reasonable. So they picked Toronto Eastern, basically the Toronto time for sunset and sunrise. So it was manageable, so people didn't go 16 hours without anything to eat.
Right.
And so what we did in this case, we brought in an imam, and they laid out what was, yes, people required, people observant Muslims required a space and a time for prayers, but they didn't all have to go at the same time.
Okay.
They could be managed, and some could be done within a private prayer room where they were able to
Mm-hmm.
do their prayers, so they didn't have to attend a mosque and things like that. So the leveling effect that I would suggest for us, if we were uh, in that situation and not necessarily always fully aware of the religion and the requirements of that religion is to level ourselves and get some good advice before
Yeah.
we try to implement some change. And in this setting, people just, for the most part, most of the people required, all they required, that's probably not fair to say, but what they required was a place to pray. They didn't have to leave the building to go do it. Some were more, like in all faiths, there's some that are more observant than others, and so they were allowed, those ones were scheduled around, so they had the time to go to the mosque for prayers, where others
Right.
were given this opportunity space. And it was also a learning opportunity that people, the non-Muslim staff were, all of the staff were brought in and then given orientation and education and a level of knowledge of what this meant and why it was done this way. And then we also coach people to consider, okay, it's so the people of the Christian faith, Christian background, even though you're not, maybe not even observant, you get all of these religious holidays that have become stat holidays and just general culture, but they come from a place of faith, right? So instead of you having to work Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, the Muslim staff are there to cover those days off, or Easter, or whatever it might be. So we were able to manage people's expectation around what this meant, and that there was trade-offs, and that there was a tit for tat in a way that people were able to manage. And so I don't know what your thoughts are, if you got any consideration now that we walked through it a little bit.
I think that it would be important, like you said, to bring in your subject matter expert. You know, this is an education opportunity, and so you can't assume that you know it. You have to make sure that you're presenting knowledge that's accurate. And then I think it's a little bit, and I don't want to use the word messaging, but it's not like it's time off to not do anything, right? Like they're asking for a time and a dedicated window, and I'm glad that you were able to find ways to make it work. I guess the biggest thing would be like that clear communication of actual information, right? That would be the one thing, regardless of the issue, would be to make sure that you are clearly communicating the accuracy. Like, okay, this isn't that somebody's coming in and then leaving early, or
Right.
this isn't that, it's like they're just sitting around, like it's the opportunity for them. And I like that you equated it to things that people could understand, like the holidays and the stats and that sort of thing. You want to find a way that people can connect to new material, right? And so I bet you not everybody I bet you there's a huge, and this is an assumption, but I bet you there was a portion of that staff that assumed that these folks were just choosing to not work on
Right.
Friday afternoon, and therefore imposing the workload on somebody else. And so if it was seen as just like not pulling their weight, that's going to do resentment, and that's going to do, dislike. And so that opportunity to communicate that this isn't about workload, this is about personal choices and everyone having them. I think that would be your key for communication.
Yeah.
It's the same now with work from home, and you've got somebody who's doing like school drop-offs. So they're asking you to not schedule a meeting while they're in carpool kind of thing, right? And it's about being respectful, but it has to be communicated that that's why they can't come at that minute and that time kind of thing.
Well, people can tolerate a lot of things as long as they feel that it's fair, right?
Yep.
As soon as people start thinking somebody's getting something that I'm not and it's not fair, then it becomes a problem.
Exactly. Yep.
Right? Even if it's not pleasant, like I don't know what it could, sort of stepping out of this particular case, but even if it's something not pleasant, that people have to do work that's not pleasant or whatever it is, but as long as they think, oh, everybody's being treated the same, well, then it's okay. One of the examples I would probably use was an engineering firm that I worked with quite some time ago, and that was tough. I was 20 for those of us in Alberta in particular, in sort of oil and gas world that's impacted by oil and gas. It was 2015 when the price of oil dropped down, and things were pretty tough for this firm, and they were asking people to take think it was a 10%, if I'm not mistaken, a 10% pay cut. And but my advice to the leadership team, the owners of the group and the partners of the group, was that you should take a 15% pay cut. Not to, just to set the example that you're taking a different level. Trust me, the difference between the pay scales, 10% of one guy's pay was not the same as 10% of the partner's pay, right? It was a bigger hit for the lower income people to lose 10% than the partners, because if you went from 200 to 180, or you went from 20 to 18, that's a big deal, right? So what we did was we just made sure it was not just fair, but extraordinarily fair, better than fair for people, so they felt that I could absorb this hit, and I see other people are doing it too. And in this case, with the matter of faith, it was like, okay, but you get this is what you're getting because you are part of this other sort of waspy Western sort of Canadian historical culture. You get a lot of benefit and stuff, and we just had to frame it in a way that was not rubbing anybody's nose in it, but being extraordinarily respectful about it all. And also bringing them on, and he was a cool guy, man. Like, he was funny and charming, and he actually brought his rabbi with him. And so they had this whole conversation about what the faiths were and how they matched up and how it matched up with the Christian faith. So they were able to have this very interesting conversation about what these things meant and how they meant. So actually, the line I remember best, I think it was the rabbi said, you Christians, he says, you do 1 hour of church every Sunday, and we go until we're done, so we might be there for hours. So everybody relaxed. But it was kind of a funny way he put it. But yeah, so I think that's, I think there's two things I would identify mostly, and Nicole, you addressed some in your comments. Was the number one thing is about it has to be fair. It has to be presumed and assumed to be fair to everybody. So if somebody's getting something, people need to understand that they're also getting something of equal value, or at least to be treated the same when it comes to their circumstance. The opportunity to educate people in something that's a little different and outside of their normal lives is always of value. You can't always do that. And then there's another thing here too, that I think there was people that were not happy with it and would never be happy with it because of their background and their history and their personal belief and values. And I think it's like, okay, so if you can't, this is our values for our organization, and this is how we want to conduct ourselves and show the world how we behave, and you can't align yourself with these values, so we need to make a different choice here and allow you to be in a situation where it aligns with your values, and it may not be here, right?
Go be cranky elsewhere.
Yeah. We want you to be happy, but you can't do that here, right? So I think too, that's another tough part of this level of conversation. If somebody can't get behind it, well, maybe this isn't the place for you.
Yeah.
And it's 2013, man. It's a very complex, nuanced, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-everything world, and we need to figure out how we're going to get behind it. And you get behind it or you don't. So I think in this case, there was some changes made, not with the frontline staff, but with other staff who just were not very nice about it all. Any thoughts?
It goes back to that second statement where there's still people. Everybody on your team is a person.
Yeah.
And so if that gets lost, what is the point?
Yeah.
You're not leading, pylons, you're leading people.
Right, exactly. Morgan, do you have anything to add? Because I know you have a very interesting workplace there with lots of people in it.
No, everybody here seems to be, they think they're treated very fairly, and I would agree that if they ask for something, it's usually accommodated and also explained why it was accommodated and the need for it, so everybody is understanding and doesn't just judge for no reason.
Thanks. So we're kind of wrapping up towards the end. This is the third case, and I think it was super interesting because it reflects the modern world, and sometimes we tend to hope things work out on their own. And unfortunately, in reality, they don't always just kind of work out on their own. And as leaders, it's our role to sort of walk into that and have that could be an uncomfortable conversation, but also a respectful conversation to make sure everybody is aligned with the values of the organization. So based on the 3 cases that we talked about, and I know we're still a pretty small, little tight group here today, and Carmen had to step away for an international call, as she mentioned earlier. So I will ask each of you in turn. I'm going to start with Morgan first, because she's just to put her on the spot a little bit, make sure she's not sleeping there in her. What's something that you took away from any of the cases this morning that allows you to think differently, or maybe be a better leader, or consider leadership differently as you go forward? What was something, is there a lesson you take
I
out of
really
this?
liked Carmen's do it, delegate it, delete it.
That's a powerful 3 words, isn't it?
It is, and I try very hard to make sure my team feels comfortable with their jobs, but also feels like they're challenged, and I'm not just doing everything that they want to be trying for themselves, because we do a lot of art projects for the creation studio. Before I pick my projects, I generally ask my team, what would you like to take on? So I try to delegate as much as I can. And some things it's just, I'm going to do it because it needs to get done now, and I don't have time to explain to someone else how.
Right, right. So one of the things that on the delegation side, I think is important. So there's 2 times you want to actually be a micromanager when you delegate. One is if they're new in the role, and one is if it's risky or dangerous or hazardous to the person or to the organization. So if it's something they want to try and there's no harm, no foul, no one's going to get hurt, the organization isn't going to suffer, they want to try it, and I think that's a fair game. But I think as leaders, I think we also have to be very conscious. Oh, sorry, there's a third one, which is performance management, right? Somebody's struggling in the role. That's like poor Joanne here. She really needed someone to be on with her, supervising her and supporting this person as she went through this experience. And can you imagine her waking up one day and thinking she's been doing a great job, but finding out 6 months later, 2 months later, that she was doing a terrible job, or worse, knowing she wasn't doing a good job, and going to work every day fearful that she was going to get fired. What a horrible place to put situation with somebody.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
For the safety thing, a lot of what we do is teamwork because of safety. We're up on ladders, we're up high, so it's a lot of teamwork in those situations. But just for projects in the back that are painting or whatever, if you want to paint it, go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what, the other thing I would say to that too is, like, just because I think I could do it better, but what you could do is good enough, right? So as long as you're clear about the expectation.
Have much more experience than I do, so I can't even say like I can do it better. It's you want to do it, you probably can do a better job than I can.
Well,
so
exactly. Yeah.
As long as it looks good enough, everybody's fine with that on my team.
Nice. How about you, Nicole? What's a couple of things, something different than what maybe I know that really resonated with everybody, but what was there something you want to take away from this?
I think that much to that point, if somebody can do or wants to do, make sure that you provide them the opportunity, because I think learning is super important. But then I think to this case, like this last case about like the faith-based, recognizing also that just because I'm a leader doesn't mean I have all of the information. And so being okay with saying, I don't know either, just a second, and not putting on a facade of leadership equals knowledge. Especially like you look at Joanne in her position, and we still don't quite know how she got there, but she obviously knew how to do her old job. Did she know how to do her new job? I would have never in a million years been able to figure out on my own independently how to solve this last case. kind of thing, right? So I think it's about making sure that every opportunity to learn, whether it be delegated so someone can learn, or realizing that you yourself don't know, is necessary in that whole team triangle.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a very powerful, succinct statement you made. Like, really, like, how good do we think we are that we know everything there is to know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, name one person, right? Nobody. But yeah, I guess too, like, you know, it's like that pride goeth before the fall too, right? Because you don't want to admit. And then how much trouble could you be in if you mess this particular case up? Organization
Right.
could get sued, human rights complaints, there could be lawsuits, there could be a reputational suit if you're, this was a very, like in this setting here, we called it a hotel, but this organization was a very public facing organization. And, you know, the reputational hit would have been unbelievable if you would have come off as a thoughtless, racist, bunch of arseholes, right?
Yeah. And I think you always just want to imagine yourself, would you have felt comfortable asking to learn more? And so if you know, like, I think you gotta build the environment that you wish you had.
Yeah. Well, that's a great line too. Well, there's some great lines. They're gonna have to hopefully copyright them because I might actually slip them into something here as we go forward. Those are great lines. Yeah, so on the next question, and I know it's a small group live today, but was this of value? Like, would you like to see more of these, or more, maybe one per session where we had an actual case study where we have the group learning and bring everybody's wisdom together?
I'd love it. I'd love one per.
First, like to focus on a subject, maybe more directly on something. Yeah. Well, that's terrific. Well, I certainly will be factoring these in because it was fun thinking back over some experiences too, a little bit. Going, oh yeah, right. And as you know, like my clumsy version of the earlier quote is, you know, like a smart man learns from his mistakes, but a wise one learns from others. So I think, you know, we need to take. I think it behooves all of us as leaders to be able to take a few minutes and kind of measure that out and make sure we're getting the good examples from everybody. So we're winding up a few minutes early, but we're winding up close to the end of our time together. And so I'd just like to remind everybody that on Thursday, October 19th at 11 Mountain is our next session. And I wish I could tell you off the top of my head that I can remember what it's about. But I can't. I'll send out a note with everybody with the link to this morning's session, and also I'm going to try to experiment and see if I can bookmark the various times within the recording of when the different case study conversations started, because I know there's a process to do that on YouTube, but I just can't do it. So it's going to be a learning experience for me on this. And to everybody, I wish you nothing but the best. I thank you very much for your time this morning and your participation. And I look forward to seeing you in a month's time at the next session of the Better Learners Inner Circle. Take care, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks. And for those who are listening to the recording, we're fun people, and you should take the time to join us because we have these rich and great conversations. So once again, thanks very much, everybody, for being part of the Inner Circle. I hope it was of value, and I hope you nothing but the best. And if you can, try to be kind to yourself, and if you have the space and energy to be kind to somebody else, what a wonderful day that would be. Take care. Thank you very much.